So I want to talk to you guys about the click. Know who the enemy is. It's not the click. First things first, the click is your friend, not your enemy. It's just another band member. You should develop the skill and confidence to play well with a click on stage. You should also be capable of keeping steady time without the click. Don't let the click become a crutch you are dependent on. Be versatile and be able to play equally well without it so that you are not dependent on having it. This is very important as a worship drummer playing prophetic worship. You will probably play in settings where you don't have a pre-planned set list. In this situation, it might be better not to use a click. You will probably need to change the tempo many times whilst you are flowing in spontaneous worship due to what is going on in the room and according to what the Holy Spirit leads you to release. If you are playing something slow and you suddenly want to release joy, freedom and dancing, then you have to speed up. So changing the click may in that case disrupt the flow if you have to stop and find a different tempo. But I am sure some of you drummers out there can make it work. These things are a matter of personal preference as well. Prophetic worship, click versus no click is a big topic here. So here are some of my thoughts based on my own experiences. When you have a pre-planned set list, it is fantastic to play on a click track. If you are used to playing with a click track on stage and you are comfortable with it, which is the place you want to get, of course, it makes your job a whole lot easier. However, I play in many settings where we don't have in-ear monitors for all the musicians. I could use a click that only I hear, but my experience is, and you might disagree with me here, that when the rest of the band doesn't hear it, they will speed up or drag, and when you are trying to stay on the click, the gap between the rest of the band and yourself is noticeable. I have played a lot on TV this last year, and I have experimented with this a bit to actually put this theory to the test. I've tried to be the only one playing with the click track in my ear, trying to keep the tempo locked in with the click while the rest of the band speeds up. What it sounds like is that the drums are dragging and slowing down, especially if you speed up with the band, which is very easy to do, and then trying to get back on the click. When I chose to just turn off the click and follow the living organism that the band is, it actually sounded tighter and I couldn't even hear that the tempo was changing. A producer once told me that it is normal for the tempo to constantly move within 4 to 6 BPM during a song and that this is not a problem. I don't know what experience you have with this, but I would like to know other people's opinion on this. For me, this is the rule that I live by. Number one, if I'm the only one in the band with a click in my ear, I will usually turn it off if the band falls off the click during a song. I do prefer that a whole band has the click in their ear though. If not, the tempo will change in the parts with a softer dynamic level if the drums play less or softer. It also requires that the drummer is always playing, at least to keep the pulse on the ride or the hi-hat. You cannot fall back completely. And number two, if we have a set list, I prefer to use a click at least on the faster songs. I often turn the click off when we start to flow into spontaneous song or an instrumental part in case we might need a sudden change in the tempo to release something as previously mentioned. Number three, if I play in a low-key acoustic setting with a lot of spontaneity, I don't use a click. And frankly, it is good practice to play without it as well, so that you are equally capable of doing both. Many drummers have a really difficult time when it comes to playing with a metronome. One thing is to practice with it at home, but using a click on stage. The more you practice with a click at home, the better you will become at keeping time. You actually need to have pretty solid timekeeping to be able to play well on a click. The band will sound better if everyone is using a click on stage. If you are recording or using tracks, you have to use it. And if you are playing on tracks, you really need to be able to totally lock in with the click. An awesome way to develop good timekeeping and overall pocket is to play on tracks when you play live. Am I a failure if I'm not capable of keeping time perfectly, or if I sometimes are not 100% locked in with the click? One of the guitar players I played with used to give me a hard time about my timekeeping some years ago when I started playing with a new band. I hadn't played the drums on a regular basis for years, and I wasn't a very good drummer either. So I lacked a solid foundation and determined practice time, and I lacked experience as well. I'm sure he was right to some degree that I was both speeding and dragging, but he was so consumed with it, like constantly complaining and comparing me to his drummer brother that apparently had perfect time, even when he turned off the click. This bothered me a lot, and I got all consumed by this too. All the focus on my lack of solid timekeeping just made me even worse at it, and I felt really down about my playing. I didn't quite have the tools to improve, so I will share some experiences and practice tips with you in the next video as a bonus to give you an idea on how to improve if this is your situation as well. And even if you have played the drums for a long time, getting better at timekeeping is actually something we work on during our entire lives as drummers. Maybe we'll get it perfectly in heaven. But obviously, all the complaining about my timing made me work really hard to improve, and it helped. Don't lose heart. Just practice and you will get better. It's actually a scientific law. When you practice something, you will get better at it. So, after a few years, I'd started to believe that I had developed a really solid timing. I had a very shocking experience in the studio, which turned my world upside down. We were recording 2 songs, and as far as I was concerned, keeping time on a click wasn't my biggest challenge. I was comfortable. So I went there and we started to record. For starters, the producer wanted to record the whole band at the same time, like a live recording. The problem was that when we listened to it afterwards in the control room, the drums were not locked in with the click, so it sounded like I was either speeding up and then dragging it back all the time. And I couldn't figure out why. After a few takes and growing frustration, we discovered that one of the other musicians were constantly pushing ahead of the rest of the band. A band is a living organism, and it's natural for the musicians to follow each other. In this case, I was struggling hard to stay on the click because this one constantly pushed ahead of the beat, and naturally I was following him, although I was trying really hard not to. I'm not saying or trying to say that he is the one to blame for me falling off the click, and I'm sure that a better drummer than myself could pull it off. I would really like to hear an experienced drummer's take on this. Anyway, I'm sure that it makes the job of every drummer more difficult when other musicians are not locked in with the click. I had one of my biggest crises as a drummer after that night in the studio. So the next time I was going to do a studio recording, I was terrified of this happening again. Luckily, this producer was one of the best producers in Norway, and he told me that no drummers, even the best drummers in the world, are always right on top of the click. The producer always has to move and align some beats to match up perfectly with the computer. This is because human beings are not drum machines. It was so comforting for me, and because this producer actually recorded the drums separately on top of a perfectly programmed track, I was able to stay on the click much better this time. This taught me a very important lesson. The band is a living organism that lives and breathes, and they speed up and slow down together, and it's not only the drummer's fault if the tempo changes. But as drummers, we have a different role in timekeeping, and we are in charge, so the steadier you are, the better you and the rest of the band will sound. I have recorded a lot of music after this incident in the studio, and I want to share some of these experiences as well. For me, it was a total game changer when I started to play on tracks on stage. I wasn't used to playing on tracks, and I had almost never used the click on stage because it wasn't really a natural thing to do in the settings which I played. So the first time I played on tracks, I was more nervous than I can remember ever being before. And actually, it didn't go too bad. And I got hired again and again to play in that church on a regular basis. So what happened was that I got much better at keeping time. My drumming sounded tighter, and I learned to use the software program Ableton as well, which is a really useful skill to have. I also learned to perform under a lot of pressure. Obviously, when you have a lot of technical gear that needs to work, many things can go wrong. I became a much better drummer during the year I played in that church, and I also believe that a well-rounded drummer should be able to play on tracks. It's a very important part of every drummer's skill set these days. I still play in that church sometimes to maintain my skills of playing to tracks. The result of all this playing on tracks was that I really started to love playing with click on stage, and I now definitely prefer to play with the click. Still, a good drummer needs to be versatile, and I do not want to be dependent on using a click to keep good time. And this is because I play in many settings where it's not very practical to use it. Sometimes they don't have in-ear monitors for the whole band. Sometimes it's a small prayer house setting, or it could be in a spontaneous setting where we are improvising a lot. So, some experiences with the click. It is challenging for the drummer to stay on the click if the rest of the band speeds up or drags behind. Yes. It's more challenging to play on a click if you as the drummer are the only one hearing it. Yes. When you record, the result will always be best if you record the drums first as a foundation. And the exception is if it's a computer program track where the tempo is perfectly fixed. If you are recording on top of a track that is pre-recorded and it's not dead on the click, it will be very difficult to make the drums sound good on top of it. It's more difficult for the drums to adapt to something that is not tight and right on the beat than the other way around. If the drums are slightly out of time and the other instruments follow the drums, it still sounds better. I've done countless recordings now, and it's really a challenge when the drum track is the last thing to be recorded on top of everything else. Although the rest of the song is recorded on a click track, most singers and musicians are not able to stay dead on the click track unless they are experienced and skilled at this. When you record on top of it, it will sound out of time and it will not sound pocket. The band is not playing together with you. You have to adapt to the band, and it will sound like you are playing on top of the rest, slightly out of sync. In the beginning, when I was asked to do a drum track on top of a finished song, I practiced for hours, recording again and again, never nailing it. I knew that I should have the skills to make it sound good, but I'm the kind of person who second guesses myself a lot, and I always conclude that I'm not good enough. But luckily, this one time, I told the band that I was recording for that I wanted to try to record the drum track on a punk rock song as the foundation. And I asked them to record their part again, this time on top of my drum track. And it worked. It sounded really good. I learned a very important lesson from this. The drums should be recorded first. An exception is, of course, if you have a track that is dead on a metronome, something programmed and fixed like EDM music, for instance. Then it's no problem to record the drums last because the track is super tight in itself. These are my experiences, not science or something that I can claim to be the truth, but I'm sharing these experiences with you so that hopefully you can benefit from my experiences.